Story 1. You think you're safe when you lock your doors at night. You think home is the one place no one can get to you. But what if someone's already inside? This first story comes from a man who swears it's real. And if it is, it's one of the most disturbing things I've ever heard. I had just gone through a breakup, and I was living alone for the first time in years. It wasn't a fancy place, just a small, two-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an old brick building in a quiet neighborhood. The rent was cheap because the place was old, drafty in the winter, creaky floors, plumbing that made strange groans in the night. But it was mine. The first week was peaceful. I actually enjoyed the quiet. I'd get home from work, make dinner, and crash on the couch with some Netflix. But by the second week, I started noticing things. Nothing huge, just weird. I'd come home and find the living room blinds slightly open when I knew I'd left them closed. A glass that I'd left in the sink would be in the dish rack. One morning, my phone charger was missing from my nightstand, only to be sitting on the coffee table when I got home from work. I figured I was just being forgetful. The breakup had messed with my head, maybe I was just scattered. But then came the breathing. The first time, it was about 2 a.m. I woke up for no reason. I wasn't hot, I wasn't cold, I just woke up. And I swear, I heard breathing. It wasn't mine. Mine was fast and shallow, I was already on edge. This breathing was slow. Steady. Almost relaxed. It was faint, but close. Too close. I turned on the lamp. Nothing. The room was empty. I laughed it off, told myself it was the radiator. But for the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening, and I swear, every so often, I heard it again. A few days later, I came home early from work. My boss let everyone out around 3 p.m. because of a snowstorm coming in. I remember walking into my apartment and feeling wrong. You ever walk into a room and feel like someone just left it? That stale warmth, that faint smell of skin and deodorant. That's what it felt like. I called out, "Hello." Nothing. I did a quick sweep of the apartment, living room, kitchen, bathroom, second bedroom, nothing. But then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. In my bedroom closet, the clothes had shifted. I have one of those narrow closets with a sliding door. I keep my shirts on the right side and jackets on the left. But now, the jackets were pushed tight together, and the shirts looked like they'd been brushed aside. And the faintest smell. Like stale breath. That night, I barely slept. And then, about 3 nights later, it happened again. The breathing. This time I sat up, heart pounding, and just listened. It was definitely coming from the closet. It would stop for a few seconds, then start again. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, but before I could turn it on, I heard one soft, deliberate step. And then, silence. The next morning, I called my buddy Dan to come over. I told him I thought someone was screwing with me, maybe an ex, maybe a neighbor. We tore the place apart. Every closet, every cupboard. Nothing. But when we got to the second bedroom, the one I barely used, Dan stopped. "Dude, what's this?" On the far wall of the closet, behind a loose sheet of drywall, was a gap. Not big, maybe enough for a person to squeeze through if they turned sideways. It led into the wall. My skin went cold. We called the building manager. He came up, took one look, and his face went pale. Apparently, the building had these old maintenance crawlspaces between units for electrical work. Most had been sealed decades ago. But this one hadn't. And judging by the flattened dust and the faint trail of footprints, someone had been using it. The police came, but they didn't find anyone. What they did find was worse. Inside the wall, just a few feet in, was a pile of stuff. A crumpled sleeping bag. A half-empty water bottle. Food wrappers. My missing phone charger. And a spiral notebook. The first page just said, "I like watching you sleep." I moved out that week. The building manager had to seal the crawlspace, but I'll never forget his face when I handed him the notebook and asked if he knew who it might be. He just said, "We've had issues here before." And he wouldn't look me in the eye. Story 2. They say mirrors are just glass and reflection. But in my parents' old house, the basement mirror didn't just reflect you, it watched you. And the thing on the other side wasn't me. I grew up in a house that always felt a little heavy. It was a big, old Victorian built in the late 1800s, with narrow hallways, high ceilings, and a basement that looked straight out of a horror movie. The basement had stone walls, a low ceiling, and a smell like wet earth that never went away. In the far corner, leaning against the wall, was this massive antique mirror. I never liked it, not just because it was cracked in the corner, but because the glass was dark, like it had soaked in 100 years of shadows. My parents said it came with the house, the previous owner didn't want to move it. That alone should have been enough to get rid of it. When I was a kid, I'd dare myself to stand in front of it for 30 seconds with the lights off. I never lasted more than 10. I'd swear my reflection was off. Not in big ways, just little things. My mouth twitching when I wasn't smiling. My eyes looking a fraction of a second too slow when I moved. And the older I got, the more it felt like it wasn't just showing me, it was waiting. Years later, I moved out for college. I barely thought about the mirror anymore. But when my dad got sick, I came back to take care of him. The first night back, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in years. A soft tapping. It was coming from the basement. I grabbed a flashlight and went down. The air was colder than it should have been, my breath visible in the beam of light. And there it was. The mirror. Except, my reflection wasn't matching me anymore. I stood still, but the reflection's head tilted slightly, like it was listening. And then it smiled. I didn't. I dropped the flashlight, and in that split second of darkness, I heard it. From inside the glass. A whisper. "You're home now." I ran back upstairs, locked the basement door, and tried to convince myself I was imagining it. But over the next few days, things escalated. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the glass when I walked past the basement door. Once, when I went down to switch the laundry, I saw two reflections in the mirror, me, and something standing just behind me. It was taller than me. Its face was pale, stretched too thin, with eyes that seemed too deep. I finally told my dad about it. He went quiet, then sighed. "I never told you, but when you were a kid, you used to talk to the mirror. You said your other self told you secrets. I got rid of the key to the basement for a reason. You were never supposed to go near it again." 2 nights later, I woke up to the basement door creaking open. I live alone in this house now. My dad's been gone for months. I grabbed the phone to call the police, but then I heard it. That same soft tapping, not from downstairs. From behind me. I turned slowly. The mirror was in my bedroom. Story 3, I thought the house was empty. But the footsteps upstairs didn't stop when I called out. They just got closer. I used to work night shifts at a small-town gas station. My schedule was a mess, so I'd sleep during the day and stay up late on my nights off. That's how I ended up dog-sitting for my friend Amanda. She had a cozy 2-story home at the edge of town, surrounded by woods. Her dog, Max, was an old black lab who mostly just slept by the couch. The first night was normal. Quiet. Peaceful. But the second night, around 1:30 a.m., I was on the couch scrolling through my phone when Max's ears perked up. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from upstairs. At first, I thought Amanda had come home early. "Hello?" I called. The footsteps stopped. I stood up, heart pounding, and grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy flashlight. I started toward the stairs, but Max stayed on the couch, low growling rumbling in his throat. That's when I realized, the upstairs lights were still off. Halfway up the stairs, the footsteps started again. Faster this time. But they weren't toward me, they were pacing. Back and forth, in one of the upstairs rooms. I tightened my grip on the flashlight and reached the landing. The sound stopped. I checked each room. Nothing. No one. But in the guest bedroom, I noticed something strange. The closet door was open just a crack. I took a deep breath, yanked it open, empty. Relieved, I shut the door, went back downstairs, and tried to shake it off. At 3:17 a.m. it started again. This time, the footsteps were in the hallway. I didn't go upstairs. I just sat frozen on the couch, Max pressed against my leg, his growl getting louder. The pacing continued for almost a full minute, and then stopped. Silence. Then I heard something that still makes my skin crawl. The sound of someone slowly walking down the stairs. I pointed my flashlight toward the staircase, nothing. But the sound kept coming, step by step, until it reached the bottom. Only, no one was there. I locked the front door, the back door, every window. But no matter where I went in the house, I could feel it, like someone was standing just behind me, waiting for me to turn around. When Amanda got back, I told her everything. She went pale and said, "You heard it too. That's why I leave Max with someone else when I'm gone. I can't be here at night anymore." That was 6 years ago. Last week, Amanda moved away and sold the house. But I drove by yesterday and saw the upstairs light on. And in the window. I swear I saw someone standing there. Story 4, I thought the attic was empty. Until I heard, breathing. When my uncle passed away, my family inherited his old Victorian house in the countryside. It was huge, dusty, and filled with antique furniture that seemed like it belonged in a horror movie. The strangest thing was the attic. The door to it was at the end of the upstairs hallway, a heavy, solid oak door with a keyhole. But there was no key. My uncle had always told us never to go up there. He'd just smile and say, "It's better if you don't." I moved into the house while we figured out what to do with it. The first night was fine. The second night, I woke up around 2:45 a.m. to a faint noise. It was coming from the attic door. A slow, steady tapping. Half asleep, I convinced myself it was probably just an old pipe. But the tapping got louder. And then I realized, it wasn't random. It was a rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Pause. I got up, walked into the hallway, and stared at the attic door. My phone flashlight reflected off the old brass keyhole, and for a second, I thought I saw movement inside. I knelt down and put my ear to the door. That's when I heard it. Breathing. It was slow, deep, and heavy, like someone was standing on the other side, leaning close to the wood. I froze, my own breath catching. Then, from inside, a whisper, "Let me out." I bolted back to my bedroom, locked the door, and sat there until morning. When the sun came up, I searched the house for a key to the attic. I found nothing. Later, I mentioned it to my neighbor, an older man who'd lived next door for decades. He told me that years ago, before my uncle bought it, a man had lived in that attic. A recluse. He barely ever came down, until one winter, when no one saw him for weeks. They found him dead, still sitting in a rocking chair in the corner. The creepy part? The rocking chair was still up there. A few nights later, I woke up to the same tapping. Only this time, it was coming from inside my room.